Constable Amy Gagnon, and I will be the moderator for the information briefing for members of Council and Ottawa Police Services Board members on the demonstration in Ottawa. Je suis l'agente Amy Gagnon et je serai la modératrice pour la séance d'information pour les membres du Conseil et de la Commission de services policiers d'Ottawa sur la manifestation à Ottawa. We're just going to pause a minute to make sure we're live on YouTube. All right. So our speakers today. Aujourd'hui, nos interlocuteurs seront Mayor Jim Watson, le maire Jim Watson, Ottawa Police Service Board Chair Diane Deans, la présidente de la Commission de services policiers d'Ottawa, Diane Deans, Ottawa Police Service Chief Peter Sloly, le chef de police du service de police d'Ottawa, Peter Sloly. We do have subject matter experts joining us for the question period, and they are Ottawa Police Service Deputy Chief Steve Bell, Acting Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson, and CAO Blair Dunker. And from the city, we have City Manager Steve Kanelakos and General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services Kim Ayotte. Qui seront des nôtres aussi pour la période de questions, le chef adjoint du service de police d'Ottawa, Steve Bell, la chef adjointe par intérim du service de police d'Ottawa, Trish Ferguson, et Blair Dunker, dirigeante principale de l'administration. De la ville, nous avons le directeur municipal, Steve Kanelakos, et le directeur général des services de protection et d'urgence, Kim Ayotte. I want to begin by acknowledging that Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Thank you to City Council for having me here today to deliver and to moderate this important update. Je tiens à débuter par une reconnaissance du fait qu'Ottawa fut construite sur un territoire algonquin Anishinaabe qui a été non cédé. Les peuples de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe habitent ce territoire depuis des millénaires. Leur culture et leur présence ont nourri et continuent de nourrir cette région. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage à tous les peuples et les terres de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. La ville d'Ottawa honore tous les membres des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis, ainsi que leur précieux apport passé et présent à ce pays. Je remercie le Conseil municipal de m'avoir permis de modérer aujourd'hui et des Métis, ainsi que leur précieux apport passé et présent à ce pays. Je remercie le Conseil municipal de m'avoir permis de modérer aujourd'hui. Today's briefing will commence with opening remarks from Mayor Jim Watson. La séance d'information débutera par une déclaration préliminaire du maire Jim Watson. Mayor Watson?
Great. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, colleagues. I want to welcome my council colleagues and members of the Ottawa Police Services Board to this information session on the demonstration. We have until about 3:45, and then the chief and I and Steve Kay are doing a media availability at 4. I want to begin by thanking Chief Sloly and Acting Deputy Chief Patricia Ferguson for their constant efforts to keep our residents informed, including Monday's press conference and a second one today. More than 2,000 people tuned in to get answers to their most pressing questions and to better understand the police response to this complex and volatile situation. Merci à vous tous d'être ici aujourd'hui pour informer le Conseil municipal et nos résidents de la ville d'Ottawa. As I've said previously, these protests have been incredibly disruptive and difficult for our residents. It's time for the protesters to go back to their own communities. We've seen a decrease in the number of participants and trucks in the downtown core, but there's still a number of protesters who say they're here to stay. OPS is implementing their demobilization plan to reduce the protesters' footprint and further contain the disruptions, certainly a priority being residential neighborhoods. As was expressed during Monday's press conference, the priority continues to be the safety of our residents, ensuring that the situation does not escalate. Notre priorité demeure la sécurité de nos résidents et le maintien de la paix. As you know, residents are frustrated and fed up, and you are hearing lots from your residents through emails and tweets and videos, and some very, very frustrated, frightened, and angry residents. I just want to remind you and the members of the media and public who are watching this, the City Human Needs Task Force continues to work with 311 and 211 to support vulnerable residents who have been impacted by the demonstrations. In other words, some of them have felt hostage in their own home, not able to get food. And I know my office has helped a couple connect with good companions in the Meals on Wheels program. But residents can require social service assistance by calling 311 or emailing hnTF@ottawa.ca. That address again is hnTF@ottawa.ca, or call 311. Et en français, gtbh@ottawa.ca, gtbh@ottawa.ca. I've relayed our residents' frustrations to the Prime Minister during a very good conversation on Monday. He expressed his support to the community and assured us that RCMP would provide the resources necessary to help our OPS efforts on the front lines of this response. Chief Sloly will also provide additional details on his discussions with RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucky. I also have spoken to Mona Fortier, the President of the Treasury Board, and Député pour Ottawa Vanier, to seek guidance on how we can help those people who have lost their job or lost hours as a result of not being able to open their store. As you know, it's traditionally in a lockdown area. We're technically out of the lockdown, but we're in another type of a lockdown. So she's looking into that. I spoke to the provincial finance minister, Peter Bethenfolby, to get some information on those provincial programs to ensure that our residents, particularly in the affected areas, Byward Market, Lower Town, Vanier, Centertown, Golden Triangle, and the like, and Yasser Naqvi, who's the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Public Safety. I want to commend Peter Sloly and the Ottawa Police Service for ensuring the safety of downtown residents and businesses and of the demonstrators themselves. There have been no deaths and no serious injuries, and that's something that we can't underestimate or overestimate or talk about. This is, people are being critical of the chief and the city. Well, it's not a victory. The victory is when you don't have people harmed or, in fact, killed. And I want to reiterate that the symbols and acts of hate witnessed over the last several years are disgusting and do not align with the values of our community. We stand with those who continue to be affected by these displays of anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, homophobia, and hate, and we remain united in our condemnation of this intolerance. The truckers released a statement today that said, in part, our message to the citizens of Ottawa is one of empathy. We understand your frustration, but those words ring hollow. So I do want to pass. I believe we're going to have Councillor Deans offer some comments, and then we are going to open it up for questions. So I'll hand it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, now we'll hear from Ottawa Police Service Board Chair, Diane Deans. Alors, nous allons maintenant entendre la présidente de la Commission des services policiers d'Ottawa, Diane Deans.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, residents, collègues, et les employés. Good afternoon, residents, colleagues, and staff. I want to start by acknowledging today that we are meeting virtually on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Ces 6 jours ont été très longs pour notre ville. It has been a very long 6 days in the nation's capital. I want to start by addressing the residents of Ottawa who have endured these demonstrations for nearly a week. I want you to know that I understand your frustration and your anger. The behavior that we are seeing in our community is absolutely unacceptable. As the nation's capital, our residents have seen many demonstrations over the years, but this goes far beyond what our citizens are accustomed to. We have seen so many unlawful acts, from the constant blaring of horns to outright harassment of people simply going about their daily lives. This is not peaceful, and many of our residents do not feel safe. These past several days, I have heard from countless residents and have had the opportunity to meet with my colleagues and council members in the affected areas. I have heard of instances of verbal abuse, sexual harassment, racism and bigotry, public urination and defecation, property damage, and even fires in our residential neighborhoods. My colleagues have been working tirelessly to assist residents in the affected areas, and I want to especially thank all of the downtown councillors for your advocacy and for your efforts. I have heard from colleagues that they desperately need more resources for their community. As chair of the Police Services Board, I cannot direct police operations, but I can assist in getting more resources. To date, I've signed MOUs to get more police from other jurisdictions to help in Ottawa, and I will continue to help in any way that I can to get the necessary resources. I've also been in close contact with our city emergency operations team and have worked to get a resource line in place to assist residents in accessing essential goods and services in the impacted areas. Residents needing help can now call 311 or 211 to connect with the Human Needs Task Force. No one should go without food, supplies, medication, or other assistance they need as a result of these protests. So now I want to set out my expectations for what I think all Ottawa residents need to hear from this briefing this afternoon. We want to hear the current status of what is happening on the ground in Ottawa today. We want to know how many protesters remain in the capital and what the options are to restore calm. We want to hear that our laws and bylaws will once again be enforced by Ottawa Police and bylaw services. We want to hear that no more heavy vehicles will be allowed into the impacted areas. We want to know how Ottawa Police and city staff will better insulate our residential neighborhoods from the impacts of these demonstrations. I want to know what resources police and city staff need from council and the police board to help ensure the safety of our communities and the people living in them. I want to ask the mayor if he will pick up the phone and call GoFundMe in the States directly and demand that they cease and desist sending money to these unlawful protesters. And perhaps while he's at it, he could pick up the phone and ask the Prime Minister to do the same. We've had some conversations about perhaps suing GoFundMe, but legal action takes time, and this is urgent. We need to cut off the pipeline of funding to these people that are unlawfully mercenaries, if you will, that are unlawfully protesting and occupying our communities. I know, Mr. Mayor, that you have had a conversation with your federal counterparts about covering the city and police costs relating to this demonstration occupation. I also want to ask if you will seek a federal relief package for all workers and businesses and anyone else who has been financially impacted by these demonstrations. And I want to thank Chief Sloly, the executive command team, and all of the officers on the ground for their dedication during these challenging times. I know the stress and the pressure under which you have all been working. I also want to thank Steve Kanalakis, the senior leadership team, and all of the city staff for their work and efforts to manage this very difficult situation. And I want to assure Ottawa residents that I will continue to work hard to get the resources we need to return our city to the peaceful and welcoming home we all know it to be. Finally, I want to say that I am sorry for the living hell that you are enduring. We live in the nation's capital, home of our democracy. We expect protests and demonstrations, but we don't expect this. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Miigwech.
Thank you, Chair Deans. We will now have Chief Sloly who will speak, and then we're going to take a few moments. We have a presentation to load. Alors, le chef Peter Sloly va maintenant nous adresser. Ensuite, on va prendre quelques moments afin de préparer la présentation. Chief Sloly.
Thank you very much. Mayor Watson, Chair Deans, members of the Police Services Board and Ottawa Council. Appreciate the opportunity here to provide information to you. And I welcome the opportunity along with my command team to provide the most up-to-date information on the status of the demonstration, our operational planning, the intelligence gathering, investigative efforts, people arrested, persons charged, plans to address substantially the public safety risks associated to the demonstration. I first, however, want to speak to the residents of Ottawa, especially those people who live or work or need to transit through the downtown core closest to where the major elements of the demonstration have been taking place over the last week. I spent the last week myself visiting the officers, talking to the residents, meeting with the business leaders. That includes, even today, a full session with the BIA in the market area of the city. This demonstration has been intolerable, unprecedented. The range of illegal, dangerous, and unacceptable activities is beyond the ability to list in the time that we have here today, and it has had an immeasurable impact on your lives, your families' lives, the business livelihood of the city. Residents have been the victims of intense noise, threatening behavior, hateful vitriol that has no place in our city or anywhere in our country. Businesses have had to close. They've lost employees. They've lost their livelihoods. In some cases, they've shuttered and closed. Our officers have been pushed to the limit. They've been injured. They're fatigued beyond my ability to describe. While I was traveling throughout the demonstration areas, Centertown, the market, Lower Town, Sandy Hill, over the course of the previous 24 hours, an elderly couple, both in wheelchairs, both of them significantly infirm, approached me. They thanked me for the work that the officers have been providing to them. They implored me to find ways to better serve and protect them. And they encouraged me to find a way to end this as safely as possible for everybody, recognizing the near impossible circumstances that we're facing in the city. While I was at City Hall visiting our officers down there who've been doing the bulk of the negotiations, I saw a married couple and their little baby daughter literally getting married. They came over and they asked me as chief, was it safe for them to go home after their marriage ceremony? Was it safe for their daughter? We spoke at length. They again thanked me and asked me to pass on those thanks to my officers and our partners. They again expressed that they knew how difficult, almost impossible it was for the circumstances that we and the residents and the businesses are facing. I saw one of our emergency service unit officers literally helping a homeless person to drink from a bottle of water while enabling that person to get the services they need in the middle of the demonstration zone with heavy trucks, heavy noise, heavy diesel, heavy fear all around. These and 1,000 other activities have been taking place around this city for the past week. While we have made significant progress in reducing the impacts of the demonstration on our residents, on our businesses, on all people in Ottawa, and on our service members, there remains an incredible amount of risk and an incredible amount of work to get done. I want to thank the members of the Ottawa Police Service and our partner agencies, City of Ottawa work staff, fire, ambulance services, roads, OC Transpo. I want to thank our police partners, federal, provincial, and municipal. I want to thank Steve Kanalakis for his leadership as a city manager, for Mayor Watson and his leadership, Chair Deans, and the members of our board. I have 4 core messages to deliver, and then I will start to turn things over to the rest of the presentation. To the unlawful demonstrators, let me be clear once again, there are consequences for your behavior. There have been arrests made. There have been charges laid. There are more coming. They will be announced even today. It does not matter how long it takes. We will find those who committed the criminal acts. We will lay charges against them, and they will face the possibility of jail as a result of it. There is no statute of limitations for criminal acts in this country. And there is nowhere you can go in this country that we cannot find you and bring you to justice. Number 2, for those that have significantly contributed to the majority of the traffic chaos that we have endured in this city, including those of you who live out of province or have registered your vehicles out of province, indeed out of country, there will be charges pursued against you, no matter where you're from. For those of you who have committed acts of hate crimes, and criminal offenses, we will charge you and you will face prosecution. That includes those who desecrated our monuments, and particularly the cenotaph. There is an active criminal investigation into the persons involved in the desecration of the cenotaph. You will hear more later from Deputy Chief Steve Bell on the status of that investigation. To the residents of Ottawa, to the business owners of Ottawa, to the people of Ottawa, we know you're hurting. We know you want more action. We are escalating our actions, including enforcement. We're going to do so without unnecessarily escalating greater public safety risks. We do not want riots. We can never accept serious injuries or deaths. But all options remain on the table. Today, the command team and I are here to provide you with the most up-to-date information possible. Intelligence information, investigation information, operations information. We're going to let you know as clearly as we can, with the appropriate context, the full nature of the threats, the risks, the unlawful conduct, the volatile elements that this disruptive demonstration has had and continues to have. As the chair and the mayor mentioned, this is a unique and unprecedented demonstration, one that is extremely well funded and one that comes with extensive public safety risks. This demonstration is local. It affects us here in the nation's capital. It affects Ottawa residents, Ottawa business owners, but it is provincial. It is national, and it is increasingly international. We have individuals who have come from every part of Canada here to Ottawa. Indeed, we have Ottawa residents participating in the demonstrations. We are now aware of a significant element from the United States that have been involved in the funding, the organizing, and the demonstrating. They have converged in our city, and there are plans for more to come. It's putting our city and our residents, our partners and our officers at great risk. We are doing our very best to manage this risk. Again, we are grateful for the fact that there have been no riots, no injuries, and no deaths to date. We cannot rest on any laurels. There is no reason to celebrate in there. Those are just facts. But there have been a lot of trauma and a lot of troubles foisted on this city. We are arresting, we are charging, we are investigating all bad actors, all criminals. Enforcement will continue. All options are on the table. This has truly become a whole of service, whole of community, whole of city, and increasingly whole of country effort. We have been working with all three levels of government, including all three levels of policing and public safety agencies: municipal police services, provincial police services, the Federal Police Service, RCMP, national security agencies, increasingly our border agencies. All options for the resolution of this demonstration are on the table, from a negotiated resolution to an enforced resolution. Let me be clear, all such options come with significant risks. Risks to rioting, risks to injury, and risks to death. Not only are we deploying all available Ottawa police resources every day, but we have also requested and received additional officers and resources from the RCMP, the OPP, and many other municipal police agencies across Ontario. We have gathered together some of the top policing experts and public safety experts, including the top public order commanders in the province and federally, to explore and prepare a range of options to end this demonstration as safely and effectively as we possibly can. We are monitoring demonstrations that are taking place across this country, from British Columbia to Alberta to Quebec and beyond. I have been in contact within the last 24 hours with RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, specifically in regards to the demonstration that is taking place in Alberta near the border, in a small town of 240 people. For those of you that have been following that particular demonstration, you can see that the very first attempt to enforce an end to that demonstration was unable to do so, created immediate public safety risks. It included vehicles being driven towards the officers, dangerous collisions resulting from that, and the immediate refilling of the spaces that were cleared in the initial efforts. All of which are elements that we're facing here. The scale and the complexity and the danger exponentially more so than that particular location. I truly hope for the safety of all police officers, first responders, residents in that town. They're faced with an extremely difficult and dangerous situation there. And we're hearing about similar demonstrations that are underway or planned to be underway in the very near future across this country. Shortly, Deputy Chief Ferguson will lay out the current situation, explain our resourcing, and our approach as we move forward. She will talk about the daily efforts we are making to contain this demonstration, to negotiate as best we can a reduction in the impacts that we've been having over the last several days, to move demonstrators into places that have less effect on residential and business areas, and to lessen the impact on the overall city. Our intent from the beginning of all such negotiations is just that, to bring to a full end the demonstration. Again, I stress, we have very little ability to negotiate with all aspects of the demonstration. There are multiple stakeholders and players and organizations involved in this, many of whom have no intent, despite our best efforts, to engage in any form of communication, coordination, never mind negotiation. Deputy Chief Ferguson will explain our efforts to redeploy officers away from the core demonstration into the market, Lower Town, Sandy Hill, Centertown, and other affected areas. Neighborhood resource team officers, crime prevention officers, community safety officers, our public order officers, to provide as much visibility, service, and safety, coordination, and cooperation with the local residents and businesses. That started yesterday, it has escalated overnight into today, and will continue to do so until and if we need those resources to rejoin the core of the demonstration. Deputy Chief Bell will describe the multiple arrests that have already taken place, the ongoing intelligence gathering and threat assessments, the ongoing investigations, including the investigation into the criminal activity at the National War Memorial. Multiple investigations have been launched, but we know that there are more reports of criminality that have not come to us. You will hear again and again in this presentation the need for residents and business owners who've been victimized by hate or by crime to report these to our hotlines. That information will be presented very shortly. Our Chief Administration Officer, Blair Dunker, will lay out the financial impacts to date, the costs of these demonstrations on the police service. I cannot imagine the full costs on the lives of our residents, the business owners, and the overall City of Ottawa. I said this week, and I said last week, all options for resolution are on the table. We are continually looking at our options and developing scenarios to end this demonstration as safely as possible, while charging and holding those who committed crimes to account. The more this demonstration continues, the more the risk to public safety increases. Every option is on the table to resolve this demonstration. That said, there may not be a policing solution to this demonstration. I will now turn things over to Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson to provide a more in-depth overview of the current operations.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. So I'd like to outline for you right now our current situation. The Ottawa Police Service and our partners have been operational 24/7 since this event began and have managed to ensure 0 injuries, 0 riots, and 0 deaths. While it is impossible to accurately state, we estimate that there were between 8,000 and 15,000 people and thousands of trucks that formed the demonstration when it was at its peak on Saturday afternoon. We have made significant progress in reducing this number, and with patient negotiations, we find ourselves with several hundred trucks in the city. Most demonstrators have left. What remains is a highly determined and highly volatile group of unlawful individuals. Beyond the core footprint, residents and businesses remain severely impacted, and there are significant ongoing social and economic costs. The next slide will be a map, and you will see the outline here of the footprint. I will tell you that successful negotiations by our police liaison team has resulted in cooperation with some truck operators and has led to the reopening of some key roadways and bridges, most recently the Chaudière Bridge. That said, many roads in the downtown core remain obstructed or closed. Residents in the area will notice that the core footprint is being hardened with barricades, replacing some of the heavy trucks that were used on the weekend. This is in large part due to the upcoming weather forecast and the fact that this machinery will be required for other purposes. If you look at the map, you'll see the green areas represent areas, roadways that have been reopened since Saturday. The red areas represent where they're closed or have very limited access to them. And you'll see in the yellow marks areas where there's one-way traffic only. I want to stress that the results in opening up routes are due to dogged and patient negotiations with demonstration organizers and individual truck operators, and these are ongoing. I will now turn it over to DC Bell.
My apologies, I believe I was on mute. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. And thank you, Trish, for the opening. I'm going to take the opportunity to give you a briefing around our intelligence and investigative efforts to date, as well as an update on where we currently sit in terms of an intelligence idea around what the next coming days is going to look like. So I can let you know that from the start of the convoy, we've continued to gather intelligence on the progress of it. We continue to work with our partners in the RCMP and OPP to gather and disseminate real-time intelligence information that is supporting our operations on an ongoing basis. From this, we know that there remains many unlawful demonstrators that are highly determined and highly volatile within our city. We're now somewhere between a demonstration and a longer-term effort to occupy our streets. What we're seeing currently is that on the weekends, past weekend, coming weekend, we're seeing an increase in demonstration-based activities. And during the week, we're seeing an attempt and effort to occupy our streets and clog congestion and movement. The intelligence that we're seeing currently is telling us that we will continue to see the convoy attempt to hold the footprint that they have. We expect to see increased vehicular traffic in the downtown core beginning on Saturday, increasing over the weekend, again anticipated to decrease come Monday. We're seeing several protesters again this weekend who intend to attend the area on foot, and our information that we're gathering indicates that we'll see large groups of people gathering in the parliamentary precinct who are both in support of the convoy efforts as well as opposed to them, and they will all be demonstrating within the same area downtown. We anticipate that these unlawful demonstrations of people on our streets will again occur right through the weekend. These demonstrations present a serious and ongoing risk to public safety that we continue to evaluate and manage on an ongoing basis. Many of the organizers and people present have stated a purpose to incite violence and spread hatred, and our officers are doing everything they can in their power to stop that from happening. Every enforcement effort that we are taking, and they are considerable, has to be weighed against the risk to incite violence. We will continue to gather, disseminate, and evaluate the intelligence to assist in our operational planning, and we will monitor it and continually provide updates on the picture that we're seeing. As we've said from the beginning, if we can go to the next slide, please. As we said from the beginning, any unlawful and illegal activity will not be tolerated in our city. We're leveraging all means that we have to gather information and intelligence to assess the ongoing risk and identify quickly criminal activity. Today, I can report to you that 3 men have been charged with criminal offenses to date, 1 with uttering threats, 1 with carrying a weapon to a public meeting, and 1 with mischief under $5,000. All of those charges have been processed and are before the courts. We continue to have 25 active investigations that we conduct investigations into, including the desecration of the War Memorial and the incidents at the Shepherds of Good Hope. We continue to receive dozens of pieces of information through the 2 hotlines that we've set up, and they continue to be investigated by our hate crimes unit. If there is a hate crime to report, please do report it to our hate crimes hotline. And if there is a criminal incident to report, please report it to our criminal hotline at extension 7300. I can't overemphasize the focus that we're placing on our criminal investigations. Our entire criminal investigations chain of command has been focused towards this effort. We continually and on an ongoing basis are conferring with our Crown attorneys who have provided amazing support to us to assist in culminating investigations and laying charges, and we will continue to do that work. We want to continue to utilize investigators and evidence gatherings teams to pursue charges against anyone who is committing an illegal act within our city. The intelligence networks that we've been utilizing also have given us strong insights into the reigning bad actors that we're continuing to deal with in our city. As I indicated, we can go to the next slide, please. As I indicated before, we've placed a focus on reporting over the last number of days. Ottawa Police Service is very fortunate to have some of the best investigators, including hate crimes investigators in the country. We know the impact that this is having and continues to have on our community. We want you to know that we are here for you to receive your reports, to protect your interests, and to look to prosecute anyone involved in criminal activity. We need people to report. You have 2 numbers here that are identified as numbers that you can call to expedite reporting. And if there's a crime in progress, you can call 911. It is exceptionally important that our residents who have witnessed or been a victim of any illegal activity, any illegal behavior, whether big or small, report it to the police. We've set up formal and informal channels in order to be able to receive this information, and we can't implore on our community enough. There is no incident too small to report to us. We have the teams, we have the investigators, and we have the people set up to conduct these investigations. We'll continue to push our message out around reporting and ask that anyone who knows of somebody who has experienced challenging or criminal activity during this protest to please encourage them to report it to the Ottawa Police Service. I'll now turn it over to Deputy Chief Ferguson to provide an overview of our enforcement efforts.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to start by acknowledging the immense cooperation and help that we've had from our law enforcement and intelligence partners. They've been generous with their time, expertise, and personnel. The crest depicted on this slide lets you know that Ottawa residents have support from across the province and indeed the country. Ottawa residents have endured nearly a week of disruptions and unlawful and sometimes downright despicable human behavior. They are rightfully fed up, and we hear you. We've been deploying hundreds of officers daily with significant contributions from our policing partners. We are now in what I would describe as a period of stabilization. We have adequate resourcing in place in the immediate area adjacent to Parliament Hill. And we have now freed up officers over the last 24 hours to deploy into impacted neighborhood areas. As of last night, our officers have begun stricter enforcement outside of the immediate demonstration vicinity. Officers and bylaw officers are now actively addressing traffic and noise violations, as well as any reported incidents in impacted neighborhoods. Our community officers have been involved in daily contact with BIAs and residents. And with information from a local councillor, two of them were made aware of a truck that was idling outside a childcare center on King Edward, and that truckers' actions were preventing the kids from being able to go outside. A conversation with our officers put an end to that behavior. There have literally been hundreds of those types of interactions that our officers have been engaging in over the last 6 days, and we intend to continue with this approach. It's a measured approach, and it's representative of the rapidly evolving and volatile situation. Heavier focus on addressing driving violations are now taking place in the downtown core, and our traffic officers who were tied up with the demonstration are now back addressing those issues. Next slide, please. I will turn this now over to CAO, Ms. Dunker.
Hi. So we are tracking costs related to enforcement and the management of the ongoing demonstrations. Our costs are currently coming in at approximately $800,000 per day, and that's in direct costs, and those costs are growing as we record and tabulate them and receive invoices. This is in addition, obviously, to the many things that have been spoken about, the economic and the social impacts related to the unlawful demonstrations. So to date, we have well over 3 million in tabulated costs and growing. And to give you some context for that, the 7-year average for the Canada Day celebrations was approximately 620,000, and Canada 150 cost 1.44 million. So this event, the costs in not this event, but this demonstration are significant. And the OPS itself is already facing significant pressures this fiscal year, as many of us know. And we have no ability to manage these costs. So at some point, we will be turning to the federal and the municipal governments for support to offset these significant and growing costs. With that, I'll turn it back over to Deputy Chief Ferguson, and she's going to give us a sense of what we may expect in terms of as we move towards the weekend. Thanks.
Thank you, Blair. So turning our mind to the weekend, we are anticipating additional demonstrators will be arriving in town. The numbers we have not yet got a full picture of. We will have the resources necessary to respond. And as Deputy Bell spoke of, investigators and evidence gathering teams will be in place to find and charge illegal behavior. We expect the weather may be difficult, but our goal is to keep everyone safe. And finally, I'd like to speak to some of the mis and disinformation currently out on social media. The police have not and will not provide material to support the demonstrators. This community has demanded their police service be professional and measured in everything we do. And I would take this opportunity to tell the community and remind some in it that measured and professional is exactly what we are doing as we face this current event. Insinuating our members have sinister motives only serves to fuel an already divisive narrative. And quite frankly, it adds an unnecessary burden on our members. And I would respectfully ask on their behalf that this is stopped. We all share the goal of ending this protracted event. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. We will now be going to the question period. La période de questions commencera. So I will be inviting councillors and board members who have questions to ask one question. We want to be able to give everyone an opportunity to speak. If there is time, we will address follow-up questions. Alors, je vais inviter les conseillers et les membres de la commission à poser une question afin de donner à chacun l'occasion de prendre la parole. Si le temps le permet, il y aura une opportunité pour des questions de suivi. We will start with a question from the mayor, and then we will invite councillors from Ward 1 to 23, beginning with Ward 1. Councillors will be able to turn on their camera when asking their question. Alors, j'inviterai d'abord le maire à poser une question. Ensuite, nous inviterons les conseillers des quartiers 1 à 23, en commençant avec le quartier 1. Les conseillers pourront ouvrir leur caméra lorsqu'ils posent une question, s'ils le désirent. So we begin. Mayor Watson, do you have a question?
I'll pass to allow more time for my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we'll start with Ward 1. Councillor Luloff, do you have a question? Avez-vous une question?
Yes, and thank you very much. I appreciate the update. We're on day 6 of this occupation. People in the city are very angry, and I'm certain that if we do not see some real tangible changes in the approach being taken, that individual citizens, and I worry about this, will begin to take matters into their own hands. This is an even more dangerous situation than what we are seeing now. I'm hearing reports that there have been attempted break-ins, harassment, and assaults, and residents are reporting it, but these calls have allegedly been brushed off due to the force's inability to respond due to the ongoing occupation and lack of resources. People are having trouble sleeping. They do not feel safe in their own homes, which is the only refuge they have left in this pandemic. And understanding my background, I don't ask this question lightly. And I understand that we are living in a tinderbox here in the nation's capital. But what is the plan moving forward, and how long will this be allowed to go on before the gradual use of force is considered? Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much. I'll invite Deputy Chief Bell to respond to the specific questions about reporting, levels of reporting that we've received so far and responses to it. Let me first of all just remind the Mayor and Council and the board, we are not waiting to consider the use of enforcement. We have been enforcing. You just heard a briefing. We have made a number of arrests. We are laying charges. That has been ongoing and will continue in the weeks and months and potentially years after this event is over. We are not waiting to start planning around the use of enforcement to remove some or all portions of the demonstration. Those plans were underway when we realized that that large demonstration was in fact moving across the country, coming towards Ontario, in Ontario, and now in the city. The plan to use all options remains on the table from the first day as it will to the last day. I will ask Deputy Chief Bell now to speak very specifically around the number of criminal complaints we've received, the process that is used once a complaint is made. And again, I urge all residents to actually report those incidents to the police. Reporting them on Twitter, talking about it to your councillor does not allow us to commence a criminal investigation. Deputy Bell.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councillor Law, for your question. So I'm gonna start it where the chief ended off. We have to have people, or we're actually imploring our community to report incidents that they're being engaged in. We've received 25 reports of criminal activity to date that we have investigators following up on and investigating. We have a dedicated team of investigators to look at our criminal matters, and we have a dedicated team of investigators to look at all of our hate crime issues. So reporting is key to us. In relation to us not responding or taking calls, I've received no information of that to date, but if you do have specific issues that you can provide to us, we'll make sure to take the complaint as well as rectify any of those reporting streams. We're working really hard with our members to identify streams and ways to get information into our organization and then into the hands of our investigators so they can immediately start the investigations into these matters. So again, it is exceptionally important. We need people to report incidents. We know how challenging this has been for our community and how much our community hurts around it. We are here to enforce the laws, but when complaints are made, we will conduct a criminal investigation.
Thank you. We will now move to Ward 2. Councillor Dudas, do you have a question? Avez-vous une question?
Thank you for this briefing and for this opportunity to ask questions on behalf of my residents and many of the residents across the city. I understand fully that as politicians, we cannot direct the Ottawa Police Service. However, I need you to clearly understand that from one corner of the city to the other, the sentiment is unanimous that this occupation of our city needs to end. The perception that I've been hearing from residents, and I've spoken to hundreds of them, is that the lack of obvious and strong action is condoning the illegal activities that have occurred. And it only opens the door up further for a disregard of our laws, our regulations, and our city's values. We've seen that residents in the court are starting to take matters into their own hands, which is a threat to their own safety. And it clearly demonstrates a sense of frustration and abandonment. The damage that this occupation has done to our city, the massive impacts on downtown residents, the concerns that they have for their safety, and not to mention the financial implications on our downtown businesses, let alone our own city's coffers. It absolutely has to end. Chief, you said that all options are on the table. You mentioned that fully, but when can we as council, as residents, even as our police force, when can we expect to get our city back?
Thank you, Councillor. I share your frustrations as you've shared them from your constituents. Let me be clear. The people that came for this demonstration did not come to the City of Ottawa for the City of Ottawa. They did not come seeking your permission or my permission. They're not coming to seek an audience with you or me. The global pandemic has been affecting this city, this province, this country, and everywhere for almost 2 years. There are people from across this country, and as we're now understanding, other countries who've come here to express some form of frustration with all forms of government activity in regards to the pandemic, and quite frankly, in regards to just about anything else that government does at municipal, provincial, and federal levels. I have an oath of office, and I hold an office that is responsible for providing safe, adequate, and effective policing to the residents of this city. I'm doing my very best. My members are doing their very best. in every interaction, whether in a demonstration or outside of one. Our actions have to be lawful. They have to be proportionate to the risk. And they really should not create even more risk having done so. This council, our board, have been very clear around the need to act lawfully, ethically, and in proportionate to the risk that we're facing. The law requires the same thing. In my comments when I started, I was clear as you've been clear. The longer this goes on, the more risks there are associated to it. This is not just a local Ottawa demonstration. There are similar demonstrations taking place in many other parts of this country, indeed many other parts around this continent and the world. What happens here affects there. What happens there affects here. We have seen in the last 24 hours attempts by other police in other jurisdictions to do just what you have suggested. They were not effective, and they created additional safety issues, potential life-threatening safety issues. I have great compassion for those that have been significantly affected, if not traumatized, and we know criminally victimized. We will do everything we can to hold those who've done that to account. We'll continue arresting and charging people as we have been. But any action taken without understanding the totality of the context, the totality of the risk, would be irresponsible. We're trying to be responsible, lawful, ethical, and measured. My last comment when I wrapped up, I'll share again now. The longer this goes on, the more I'm convinced there may not be a police solution to this demonstration. There are police chiefs, commissioners across this country that are dealing with demonstrations that are starting, underway, and significantly advanced. This is a national issue, not an Ottawa issue. As the Ottawa Police Chief, I will continue to do, my members will continue to do their very best to keep this city as safe as possible in these unique and unprecedented circumstances.
Ward 3.
Amy, it's Diane Deans. I'm
Yes.
just wondering if it would be possible to allow the two councillors in the most impacted area, Councillor Catherine McKenney and then Councillor Matthew Fleury, if they could ask their questions next. With the agreement of the rest of council, they are in the eye of the storm, and I think it would be good of council to allow them to ask their questions early on in this briefing.
Yes, I'm sure we can do that. So you'd like it to be
Thank
Catherine
you.
McKenney first, and then Councillor Fleury, is that right?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Want to make sure I have the right order. Yes, we can do that.
Thank
So
you.
I will ask Councillor McKenney if you can ask your question, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Chair Deans. I appreciate that allowing me to go next. There are two lines of confrontation in this city. There is what is happening on the Hill on Wellington, the main occupation, and then there is what is happening in our residential neighborhoods. And I hear no urgency today to what is happening to residents in their neighborhood. It is not just disruptive and difficult. It is violent and terrorizing, and it is targeting residents in their homes, near their homes, as they walk down their street. And residents downtown have been abandoned during a national crisis and an occupation of our city. And I can respect that what's happening on the Hill is volatile. And I can respect that the response to that, I don't profess to be an expert in policing, crowd control, riot control, and I respect that I don't have advice on how that mob is managed. But when we think about what is happening south of Wellington, it is impacting residents, what they want to see, and I appreciate Councillor Deans mentioning that the task force, can be sent out to provide, necessities for people. But what we need the federal RCMP to take over the full lead for what is happening on Parliament Hill and Wellington. You can request that. The mayor, chief of police, you can request it, and I beg you to request it. Having the neighborhood response teams back into residential neighborhoods when they are under siege is not enough. They are left to themselves. It cannot continue. This is not a judgment on one force over another. What it is a plea that you recognize as our local police force, that you owe it to our residents to be there full time, that you hand over the lead. I understand there will still be some members of the police service on the Hill, but that you hand over the lead to the RCMP and that you turn all of your attention to what's happening in our community. Women are being violently harassed. Seniors cannot go into the grocery store without being yelled at. People want to see drivers stop. It's one at a time. This is not mobs. What's happening in our residential neighborhoods is not mobs. It's one car, one truck, honking horns, driving down sidewalks, children trying to get to school. People are terrified. It's constant honking. It is terrorizing. Residents need to move around. They need it every day. So this is not just about extra resources. This is about you turning your attention to the people that you're meant to serve. I've written to you with my colleague, Councillor Fleury, asking that you request that the RCMP come onto the Hill and take control. And when this is over, I'm telling you and residents of this city that I'm writing myself to the Prime Minister and to the Commissioner, the RCMP, Lucky, and I'm going to ask, I'm going to beg them to take over what's happening on the Hill so that our local police service can turn its attention to the people in this city who are being terrorized in their neighborhood. I don't think that I can express enough what is happening. I know we don't want riots. There are already riots happening. It is happening. Happened on Laurier last night. People are terrified. They're terrified, and there's no presence of police. It has to change. So I'm going to leave it at that. I've asked you earlier if you were going to. I didn't get a clear answer. But I'm going to tell you that I will turn my attention and for the residents of this city to know that I will turn my attention to begging the federal government to come in and take over what's happening on the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And as we discussed on the call earlier on with the BIA, it's too bad that we didn't have a chance to speak yesterday when I reached out to you. I suspect you're incredibly busy looking after your constituents, and I know that's your priority.
I didn't get a message from you. It must have been a mistake, but I'm not saying you didn't, but I just certainly did not ignore you, Chief.
No, I certainly suspect it was a mistake, but it wasn't from a lack of attempt on my part to engage you on these very, very topical issues. And as you have been briefed by me, I think this will be the third time this week, and we've had a chance to get in depth. So I appreciate the lines of communication are very strong and very open, and that we've had many conversations over the last week and will continue to do so, no doubt. So thank you, Councillor. I'm going to very shortly ask Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson to provide a much deeper briefing than she was able to in the initial part around what we have done in the last 24 hours, what activities have been taking place, and what will continue to happen over the next several days, depending on whether or not we get back into a large-scale demonstration. As I've said to you and others on this call, I'm in daily contact with Commissioner Brenda Lucki. We actually just sent the latest staffing request over to her, and I've just heard back. That staffing request includes the provision of public order units, additional public order units, on top of what she's been able to generously provide already, investigators, intelligence analysts, supervisors, traffic control officers. I think you know, Councillor, that the RCMP, although in the tens of thousands, has policing jurisdictions for the National Capital Region, for several provinces, contract policing, northern remote territorial policing, international policing, peacekeeping, and force protection for embassies around the world. They are probably more underfunded than the Ottawa Police Services, and they are probably extremely overstretched. They have been very generous, but they do not have unlimited resources. They are also not the police of jurisdiction here. And we have invited them, and they have accepted an invitation to be part of our incident command program. They're part of our constellation of public sector, national security, private sector agencies that form Intersect, and they have been involved in the planning, the intelligence, and the operations from the very beginning, and they will continue to do so. What you're talking about is transitioning the lead role from the Ottawa Police to the RCMP. That's not jurisdictionally possible. What we want to focus on, and what we are focusing on, and what we have been focusing on, is increasing the amount of resources you can move from the demonstration into the immediately affected areas, which obviously includes your constituent area. And I'll turn things over to Deputy Chief Ferguson to continue on with providing additional information as to what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councillor. Your constituents are lucky to have you, and you make a very impassioned and very wonderful case on their behalf. I'd like to try and explain what we have been attempting to do, and I'll start by saying our very stretched resources are now being asked to stretch a little bit more. Our members have been working 24/7, and it's only really in large part in the last couple of days due to help from outside agencies that we've been able to now turn our mind to what you're asking us to do and what is expected of us. And we know that it hurts our members to not be able to address all of the things that they signed up, each and every one of them, to do in this city, was to serve people, and especially our most vulnerable. So I can tell you that the NRT teams, we have taken them now from quick response teams addressing issues in the footprint of the demonstration to now spreading out into your ward, Councillor Fleury's ward, Councillor Menard's ward, to address some of the folks who are most impacted by this. And we're prioritizing as we go with things like our vulnerable community residents, our homeless shelters, those places where we know that we are needed most. Our goal is going to be to reduce the perception of disorder and the actual activities that lead to disorder in neighborhoods. We are going to be looking to promote community safety and well-being, preventing crime and disorder, protecting our vulnerable, creating a flow of vital intelligence on a range of issues relating to the protest. We'll be speaking to people, gathering whatever information they are able to share, and looking to reduce crime and victimization on a large scale. We will be highly visible with a focus on customer service, problem solving, and ensuring that our members will continue to provide the duty of care that they already do to this community in the way that they want to. What I will say, though, is if we don't hear from residents, we don't know what's going on. And it has already been addressed by a number of the speakers, but mentioning it to, I spoke about the truck on King Edward. That was because the councillor shared that with the local community police officer. There are easier ways to report. People can call, all of our numbers. They can report online if they're concerned, but we need to hear from you for us to be able to do things. And we are now in a position where we are able to and willing and going to get our boots on the ground in the areas that you need us in. So I appreciate the question and the very difficult and traumatizing situation some of our residents have been living through. And So we will be doing our very best now to address that as much as we can. And we're thankful for all the help that we've got, especially with our city partners who have also been helping, because some of these are issues that they can help with as well. Thank you.
I'll now ask Councillor Fleury from Ward 12 to ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Tout d'abord, merci aux résidents, aux résidentes et aux entreprises qui écoutent cette mise à jour. I want to thank all colleagues. I want to thank local businesses. I want to thank local residents for staying engaged, for sharing information. I know there's a lot of media listening on, and I think it's important to address this matter. There are really two Ottawas. There's the Ottawa and the responsibility of the national government and federal precinct. There's also the local Ottawa. And when councillors like me speak, we're speaking on behalf of our residents in our neighborhoods, businesses in our neighborhoods. And it's been extremely difficult to share what we're facing and what we're seeing with all the noise that's happening on social media platforms and on national coverage of the situation and the occupation in Ottawa. I want to bring you to that. My community keeps raising, saying, how come these real stories aren't being shared? How come they're not taking us seriously in our community and the impacts that we're hearing? Les résidents du quartier sont intimidés. Ils se sentent intimidés, ils se sentent en otage chez eux. Ils ont de la difficulté à prendre des décisions. Ils sont chez eux, ils entendent les klaxons, ils entendent les cris, ils voient ce qui se passe au niveau des crimes haineux, ils sont intimidés, puis ils ont peur de sortir. Vous le savez, en milieu urbain, on a peu d'espace. On recherche les espaces publics, les espaces commerciaux, puis on a très peu. J'ai personnellement reçu des menaces sur les médias sociaux. Je m'excuse à ma communauté de ne pas pouvoir communiquer aussi régulièrement qu'ils sont habitués. De ma part. Je demeure disponible, je demeure impliqué et je continue à recevoir toute l'information qu'ils me partagent. J'incite aussi ma communauté à continuer à rapporter de façon officielle. S'il vous plaît, sortez des médias sociaux et comme la police le dit, comme les autorités de la ville le disent, s'il vous plaît, signalez tout incident officiellement et non sur les plateformes des médias sociaux. Ce n'est pas pertinent et il n'y a pas de suivi à faire. Donc, c'est important pour que ce soit réellement pris et suivi que vous le fassiez. Public safety in our neighborhoods, as you've heard from a friend and colleague, Catherine, are my othermost focus right now. We're hearing residents wanting to take the bus and issues of safety going to the bus. We're hearing kitchen staffs leaving their work and being harassed to take the LRT at Rideau, where residents feel hostage in their own home with the noise, the yelling, the intimidation, the hate crimes. They're scared. They go out, they're scared. They're in their house, they're scared. The noise is unbearable. 6 days of honking, nonstop, early day, late night, all day. Rideau Center being closed. I don't know, for those of you councillors and colleagues like me and for those in the media, closing the Rideau Center. Can you imagine that? The Rideau Center has been closed since Saturday afternoon. They've now confirmed that they will remain closed until February 6th. Just think of that as the economic small business, commercial spaces of our city and all the links that are tied into that when you think of small, locally owned businesses on Rideau Street and in the Broward Market, and how this has increasingly negatively impacted their ability to operate. They've made decisions, many to close because they fear. So I'm asking you, Chief and authorities, what are you doing to provide proactive and visible policing security for residents and businesses in my community, specifically outside of the federal precinct? In my community, it's Rideau Street, Broward Market. In Councillor McKenney's area, it's in Centertown. We're not in competition. We're working together, but we do feel the same concerns from residents and businesses, and we want to make sure that local public safety is uttermost of mind. I will ask sub questions to that very briefly, and then I will not come back on. Are you having dialogues, as you've described, with policing and public safety? Are you encouraged by that? Do you have enough boots on the ground as it relates to RCMP and OPP? Do you have enough resources, Chief and OPS? Those are questions that I continue to get from residents and want clarification on. So thank you, Councillor Chair Dean, for giving the space for Councillor McKenney and I to raise our questions, and obviously we have so many more to ask.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, echo previous comments. You're speaking eloquently and passionately about the needs and frustrations and victimization of your constituents, including the business group. And I appreciate the opportunity to meet with yourself, the mayor, Councillor McKenney, and the BIAs down in the market area for an hour this morning, discussing the range of issues. And again, great expressions from leaders or business leaders, small and medium-sized employers, and people who've lived in this city all their lives, including one business owner whose father was a member of the Ottawa Police Service for over 30 years. A great deal of understanding and compassion about what we're all facing here, and our mutual commitment to get to a better place as quickly and as safely as possible. I will once again ask Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson to provide answers to your specific questions in regards to the levels of police services available to your and Councillor McKenney's wards. Trish, if you're able to go again through the information.
Certainly, and I think Councillor Fleury, I think you've been working as hard as a lot of our members, standing up for your residents and advocating on their behalf. And while I am very appreciative of the information sharing, again, I would just like to remind constituents that they can report to us directly, and it will assist us in streamlining their needs and how we can get officers there as quickly as possible. I think you're aware of the CPOs and just how effective those community police officers are, and you have a couple of fantastic officers in your zones. And they are a great conduit certainly for the business community to leverage and to share their pressing issues. Most of them are quite similar, and something that we can develop a plan in going forward. And we have been working on how we're going to address that. You will see the neighborhood resource teams will be coming into your neighbors, into your neighborhoods. We have upwards over 20 officers that we will be deploying. They started last night. They hit over 24 businesses and residents going in to speak to people. Obviously, it takes time, and we know that right now people have a lot to say about it, and they're there to listen, to gather information, and to build intelligence and share that back into our organization or to our city partners. If it's something that needs to be addressed by another service, then we will look to leverage those as well. So I know it seems it's a slow process. We have had to really make sure that we had the downtown core solidified and protected, and I think we are, as of yesterday, in a pretty good situation. Again, it's a measured approach, and you will see now that they will be going out and addressing what they can. In terms of do we have enough resources? We will always benefit from more resources or more partners, and so the magic of the community police officers is one of them is worth 10 officers, because they're problem solvers, and they are able to connect quickly because they have those relationships that are already built. So I want to thank them for that, and I think we will continue to leverage them and try and magnify the impact that they have in your area. So thank you.
Chair Deans, we do have a hard stop at 3:45. So I'm wondering if you could give us some direction as to what other councillors would be important to ask a question.
There are board members on the call too. Maybe
as well.
Councillor Menard is also in an impacted area and has kindly asked for permission to go next. And then after that, I would just say to my council colleagues and board colleagues, if you don't have a pressing question, maybe you could just yield the floor to the next person, because I know there are a lot of questions. And just to everyone, if you could be very concise in asking your questions so that everybody that wants an opportunity gets one.
Okay, thank you. So we'll resume with Councillor Menard, and then we'll go back to the order. So Councillor Menard, if you would like to ask a question, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to Chair Deans as well. This is in my ward too. It's not nearly as much as Councillor Fleury and Councillor McKinney's, but it is here. So I'll be concise in my question. The main question I have is how are you specifically keeping the large trucks from going into residential neighborhoods? And how are you preventing more large trucks from going into our downtown, taking up more space this weekend? Where does a court injunction stand? And are you setting deadlines for those trucks in the residential areas with strict fines if they remain? Thank you.
Councillor Menard, thank you. As a resident in your ward, I can appreciate you representing my interests as well as the rest of everybody else's interests. I'll ask Trish Ferguson to speak to the traffic plan for the weekend shortly. I can confirm we reached out to the city legal services, city manager last week to initiate discussions, included a briefing to our board chair, to initiate discussions around the seeking of an injunction. The city would have to lead that injunction process. We and other agencies would support that injunction application by way of information. I can tell you that as of today, there was a meeting between our legal services team, my general counsel, Christiane Hinault, and the legal services team of the city to continue the injunction application process. I've said before, I'll say it again, all options are on the table, including the pursuit of an injunction to address some significant, if not all, parts of the demonstration. With that, I'll turn things over to Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson to talk about the traffic plan for what we can so far through intelligence anticipate that's coming to the city.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councillor Menard. So our traffic officers, as you probably anybody who follows their Twitter handle knows how effective they are when they turn their minds to specific incidents. And so we have asked them to turn some attention to the idling and the driving infractions, which we have seen an increase of. I was just getting numbers this morning from our folks, and they are definitely out there and laying down the rules of the road for all of those such incidents. In terms of our ability to limit people moving around in the street, we do not have authority to prevent trucks from going into certain areas. Now, obviously, we have truck routes in this city, and those are the types of Highway Traffic Act things that we can enforce, but we're not able to necessarily shut down streets per se and prevent people from being able to travel and circulate through those. That's just not a right that obviously this public is willing to give up, nor should they. So our traffic folks will continue to enforce for noise, for driving infractions, for HTA violations. They're working right now with some bylaw officers, and obviously we know that this has to be a measured approach, because we are seeing, as we do with just regular citizens when they get a traffic ticket, it's obviously evokes quite a lot of emotion and sometimes anger, and we have to do this in a measured and approach that's not going to put any of our members at risk or any of these truckers at risk, but we are working and will diligently continue to enforce the rules of the road.
Okay, thank you. I just urge whatever action we can to get those trucks off the residential roads, whether that's barriers in place for local traffic only or whatever we need to do. That's the number one complaint we're getting, is the debilitating noise of trucks going through those residential areas. And that's what I'm really trying to hem in or stop any way we can. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. We will continue going through our wards. So we will now go with Ward 3. Councillor Harder, if you have a question. 'Cause 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 'cause
Sorry, it takes a while for you to get allowed back in. Often, this council does not speak with one voice. Today we do. And together we are united in expressing our solidarity to condemn these actions. And I have a question for you. Chief, you said that that this weekend, your intelligence tells you this weekend, that the more trucks are coming into town, they'll be added to the convoy, there'll be a different perhaps action on the Hill. My question to you is, because you saying that leads me to believe, and I'm sure others, that there's no action to stop what's happening now before the weekend. And that is very frightening. And my question is, why are you not looking at stopping this new traffic coming into our city? Why are you not looking at putting barriers up at the Antrim truck stop, at the Highway 7, on the 416, on Highway 31 and the 417? Why are you not doing that? Why not stop them that way? And why not give the people who are most affected in our city hope that the days of the tyranny put upon them will be coming to an end? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. I think you've heard me on different occasions, certainly even before I came here as chief. For very complex issues, there is never a silver bullet solution. I'll be quite clear, and I stand to be corrected by those who are lawyers, but the lawyers who advise me have been very clear. There is nothing within the Charter of Rights that would allow any police jurisdiction anywhere in Canada to seal off a city from people driving any conveyance coming into the city. One of the fundamental charter rights is freedom of movement. So to deny freedom of movement to people who are coming to express their charter rights, I don't have a lawful authority that I'm aware of to allow me to do that. I think as well as any, that this is Canada's largest geographic municipality. I forget the actual number of square miles, but I am learning about all the number of ways in and out of this city, including 5 provincial bridges and the 400 series highways, never mind all the other roadways and byways. I would need a police service probably the size of 50,000 to even begin to attempt to do that, even if I had the lawful authority to do so. What we are doing, lessons learned from last week and intelligence gathered during this week, is we are starting to curtail some of those access routes. So for instance, once we realized the amount of truck traffic that was coming across the bridges, we closed the majority of those bridges, and the ones that we left open, we created a checkpoint to still allow people to filter through who are emergency service providers, healthcare workers, city workers, and other people that we could verify. That doesn't block the foot traffic. It doesn't block all the other traffic. So this is the conundrum we're in. There's no lawful authority to seal a city. There is no practical capability to seal this city, the size of it. And if we were to do so and block every truck that could come through here, the economic impact would be even greater than what we've talked about right now. The impact of people trying to move and support their businesses, supply their businesses, would be almost as, if not more catastrophic than it has been. So I know, as a leader in the city, as someone representing the voice of your constituents, you are looking for that elegant, simple solution. That particular solution is not one that's available to me or any other police chief in any other jurisdiction. We will do our very best to fine-tune the traffic plan based on the intelligence that's coming in with the support of our federal, provincial, on both sides of the province partners and our local partners, as well as the City of Ottawa, in terms of looking at ways that we can guide trucks, block some access ways. We have hardened, as you've heard, Trish Ferguson, we've hardened elements of the downtown. We're bringing in cement barriers. We've used snow removal machines up until now. They need to be freed up for the snow that's coming in the next 24 to 48 hours. All of those options are being looked at. But there is no way that we can block every truck from coming into any access point in a city of this size. I hope that answers your question.
We will move on to Ward 4. Councillor Curry, you have a question? Vous avez une question?
Thank you very much. I do want to thank everyone who's given us enough information here for us to realize just how bad the situation is. I'm hearing that officers are tired. I'm hearing that snow is coming. I'm hearing that the snow vehicles that we've been using need to be moved for the snow. I'm hearing it's costing us $800,000 a day. And I'm hearing that there are a lot of things that we can do in terms of giving people phone numbers to make sure they're reporting. So I think I'm hearing a lot of important information. And I guess I know what people in Canada have asked me, and that is, why are we not bringing in the Army? If there are potentially groups coming from the US, who has to make that decision? Who makes that call? And is that maybe not a solution with, the Army has vehicles? I'm hearing we can't block streets, block access, but, the Army is an entirely different group. So I'm just wondering, why are we not contemplating that? You say we are not, nothing is off the table, everything's on the table. What would it take for it just to be the Army to let any truckers that are coming this weekend or groups of people that are coming this weekend that this is going to be a different situation this time?
Thank you, Councillor. Spent a large chunk of my day out in Canada yesterday talking with our public order commanders. And in fact, at that meeting, as we have over the last week, we discussed the option of military aid to civil power. I've said it again, we're looking at every single option, including military aid to civil power. I've had those discussions with mayor, council members, the board. There is a process. It's extremely well established, extremely well governed, and extremely rare. The only two occasions that I'm aware of in the last 100 years was in the Oka crisis and in the FLQ crisis. One in the 1960s or 70s and one in the 1990s. I have seen in my own policing time in the UN peacekeeping mission in Kosovo exactly how that looks when the military are mixed in with police. And there are some amazing capabilities that come with it, and there are some incredible risks that go with it as well. It is not a decision to be taken lightly. I'll say it again, as I said before, every option is being looked at. None of the options create a beautiful, elegant, simple, safe solution. They all come with massive risks. That option in particular would come with massive risks. Military are war fighters and peacemakers. They are not peacekeepers, and they are not police officers. They have a different training and equipment and mindset when it comes to assessing threats, threats to themselves, threats to others, and they have a whole different tool set and training set to effect the mitigation, if not the end of that threat. And mixing them into a population in the downtown core in a highly volatile demonstration without any much more than days in advance warning may mitigate some risks and may create and escalate a whole bunch of other risks. All options are on the table. Our lawyers are looking at all of them. Our commanders are looking at all of them. All of them come with massive risks. I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you very much.
And we'll move on to Ward 5, Councillor El Shantiri. Do you have a question?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry it takes time to, I'm not sure why don't you put people in a waiting room instead of waiting for each one to log on. But anyway, I just want to say thank you, Chief, for your leadership, and thanks to everyone, the officers, the bylaw, everyone who has to work all weekend and is still working. One question about the cost. We keep hearing about the police costs. We haven't heard yet from other costs, bylaw services, public works, other paramedics on call, fire on call. We haven't heard the cost of other city services. That's my first question. My second question is, Chief, in the past, we had a working group working together with the protester and perhaps, walking and driving the street together to make sure we don't hear those stories, and they should be held responsible. If they are responsible for that demonstration, they should be on site to see a truck blocking a daycare. They should see a truck blocking people going grocery. They should see what their affiliation with the demonstrator are doing in our city. And we haven't seen this. We've seen our city saw a longer demonstration in the past, but was never out of order the way we've seen this one here.
Thank you very much, Councillor El-Santiri. I will leave it to City Manager Steve Kanellakis to start to pull together the totality of the costs. My Chief Administration Officer Blair Dunker is factoring the costs specifically to the Ottawa Police Service. That is the number that we've seen between the 700 to 800,000 per day range. In regards to your specific question around whether we're using what I think you're referring to as police liaison officers who would normally communicate with, coordinate, negotiate with protesters, yes, we actually significantly increased the size and number of our PLT officers, and I'll leave that to Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson to speak to that in a minute. They've been fully engaged for over the past full week once we transitioned from an OPP-led negotiation to an Ottawa Police-led negotiation. We've actually sought and received additional police liaison officers from the OPP. We are bringing in higher level negotiators to support their activities. I remind you, and I know you know this, sir, but I remind City and Council, this is a demonstration that has literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different groups, individual lone wolf actors, local, provincial, national, and international actors who are engaging online and on our streets. We have, through our negotiations, been able to establish a reasonable level of communication and a modicum of cooperation with a core group of the original trucker demonstrators. But that does not account for a large and diverse number of people. We're now finding that we've got significant success in negotiating and reducing the impact of the original trucker demonstrators. That's where we've seen the largest number of trucks leave and demonstrators leave. That's where we've had the success in reducing the footprint in the city, the number of noise coming from those elements. Where we have little to no communication and almost no ability to negotiate anything is all of the ones and twos, trucks and SUVs and cars and individuals walking across the bridges and coming into our city by any number of means, from train and plane and automobile, and then walking around in our cities and causing disorder and trauma to our residents and our businesses. And that's been the challenge that makes this unique and unprecedented in terms of a demonstration. Whatever we negotiate with one group does not stand for all the groups in the city. And that has been one of the huge frustrations and challenges. I will ask Deputy Ferguson to speak to the role of the PLT within this current demonstration so far, and any additional information she may have in that area.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councillor El-Santiri. Our PLT, as the Chief alluded to, we have actually increased our team, the size of it threefold, and since from learning from other demonstrations and how key those roles are. And those officers, again, have been working around the clock to establish communications. And I think the Chief has already, spoken to most of the aspects of it, but there are obviously some different influencers in this. And so while we are connecting with the people on the ground who are identified as team captains for the convoy and very much investing a lot of time and effort in building those relationships and ensuring that the communication is flowing, there are a number of people who are hell-bent on just causing disruption, and they're not interested in negotiating, and so that makes that position difficult. I do think that we can appeal to a number of the team captains because they don't want to, a number of them don't want to sully their name by some of the actions of other fringe groups that are associating themselves with them. And so your point is well taken, and I will bring it back to them and see if that is something that they are able to incorporate in their actions with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Steve Kanellakis, did you want to address the city question about the city?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, Councillor, we have set up a cost center that everybody's coding all their costs and time to, but I don't have a rolled up number yet, but we will have one. We'll be able to report out to council, but we're tracking all of our costs across all services.
It will be fair to say, Mr. Kanellakis, more than just $700,000 or $800,000 a day. Because once you factor the other costs, it's going to be a lot more than just a police cost.
Oh, absolutely. I think the numbers are going to escalate considerably.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have to do a hard stop. I know there are many other questions. This is the time allowed. We have a 15-minute break, and then there will be a virtual media availability at 4 p.m. Yeah, go ahead.
Could we extend to 4 o'clock? Members of council and the board, we're all offered an opportunity to ask a question, even if they're rapid fire. If we could get in as many questions as possible in fairness to the board members and council members, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, Chair, I appreciate that too. I will extend myself. However, I'm going to ask that we allow my commanders to go back to doing the work that I think everybody needs them to do. So I will do my best to answer the questions without the support of Trish Ferguson, Steve Bell, Blair Dunker. We actually have a lot of police work to do, and every 15 minutes is actually incredibly important. So I will stay on, and I'll just ask the rest of my team, with the exception of Amy, to go back to their responsibilities.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, go for it, Mayor.
I think, as Eli suggested, is there any way of letting people in the waiting room? Because there's too much valuable time we're wasting in between. So let's get people in the waiting room. And my colleagues, if we could be more succinct, it's more a question period as opposed to a speech period. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll work on both of that. And just for the next 15 minutes, our sign language interpreters need a break to be able to interpret for the media availability. So there won't be sign language for the next 15 minutes. That being said, we will keep going then with Ward 6 Councillor Gower. If you have a question. And if we could let Councillor Kavanaugh in as well, she will be next.
Thank you very much. Hearing Language Chief about holding territory, about foreign funding, about incitement of violence, Deputy Chief Bell mentioned that one of the charges was related to carrying a weapon. Do you have any intelligence or reason to believe that there are firearms, that we're dealing with that kind of a threat, especially with all the caution around wanting to provoke these occupiers in any way?
Councillor Gower, thank you very much. And I will be a bit rapid fire. Yes, we have had indication around firearms coming into this jurisdiction as part of this demonstration from as much as a week and a half ago. In fact, there was an arrest made in the East Coast of an individual who was threatening to bring a firearm here, and that interdiction happened before they were able to get close to Ontario. We're aware of a wide variety of weapons that have been incited to come into the demonstration. And quite frankly, the weapons of opportunity that are represented by hockey sticks, flagpoles, vehicles themselves, and trucks represent probably the greatest and most imminent threat that our officers faced every single minute that this demonstration has been. Weapons were used in the demonstration. Vehicles were turned into weapons and used as such in the demonstration that took place in Alberta in the previous 24 hours. That is one of the major risks that we've been facing and trying to mitigate at every point throughout the pre-planning, through the demonstration and into this period of transition, and it will continue to be a major risk for all of our officers and the entire city going forward.
Thank you, Chief.
Councillor Kavanaugh, and then following that, it'll be Councillor Chiarelli.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the interventions of my colleagues, and I appreciate the update overall from staff, from the police and from city staff. It's about rebuilding trust. The concern is, and you're quite aware of this, and much of your presentation dealt with it, is the feeling that this is a group that's being treated special compared to other protests, and that is a concern. Examples are the parking, where a ticket can be issued. This is by law more than police, but where parking tickets are issued to regular citizens and not to trucks blocking roads. And I've heard some explanation, but I just want to pass on that's one of the biggest concerns. The other one, I've had a report of bonfires at the corner of Slater and Lyon, and reported to 911 where it was told that that was okay. And when they repeatedly call 911 and told that's okay, that's where the trust goes. And that's on social media. So it has an effect of people not believing that the police are responding to their concerns. And so you don't have to address those particular ones, but I think there's an overall strategy here that we need to know that there is a response. I'm hearing that the lines are open, but those are the kinds of concerns that we're hearing that create a feeling that we're not being treated seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I will go back and have the records of our CAD calls coming into our police service about bonfires be checked. If in fact that language was used, we will we'll do an investigation into the conduct and the processes around it. In regards to bylaw, I will leave that to Kim Ayotte to speak to that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, well, bylaw continues to do everything they need to do within or outside of the perimeter, outside of the red zone. And within the red zone, they're doing it in consultation with police, and they're doing their job. So sorry, Councillor, did you have a specific question with regards to bylaw?
It's related to parking tickets. Why is a truck not given a parking ticket, yet a citizen who just parks overtime and actually paid is getting ticketed?
Yeah, so all activities outside of the red zone it's regular business for the citizens of Ottawa, and that's where most of the tickets are taking place. The one ticket you're referring to occurred on the market, and the market, when they started collapsing the red zone, which is the area of demonstration, the market was no longer in the red zone, and bylaw started to do their regular duties in that area. There was another two social media accounts relating to people who had the same kind of activities, but they were nowhere near the center town. They were just complaining that they actually got tickets somewhere in the city of Ottawa when the truckers are not getting tickets. And obviously, we're not going to put our bylaw officers at risk by having them go into the hot zone and issue tickets to a crowd that could become violent.
Okay, so there's no
police intervention.
So there's no.
Sorry, let me clarify. Yeah, let me clarify. There have been 115 tickets in the red zone, but we pick and choose when we do that, and they're primarily for people who are blocking the emergency lanes, people who are blocking residential lanes where people can't get out, and people who are blocking fire hydrants. All public safety issues that need to be addressed immediately. So there have been tickets issued, and with police escort.
Okay, thank you very much for your responses.
Thank you.
We'll go to Councillor Chiarelli, and then we'll go to Councillor Eagleye.
Thank you. I just noticed today, just a month ago, there were people asking for defunding of police. And today, the same people are upset that there's not enough police presence. So I think this is a good learning moment for everyone about that. But my question would be regarding the need to report. I know I've dealt with my residents many times on the need to report, and they feel uncomfortable phoning in a complaint once, let alone 2, 3, or 4 times. But we really have to drive home the importance of doing it repeatedly if you see repeated apparent offenses. So I think that's important. But the question would be, is there anyone there who would define, since we were asked to encourage people to report hate crimes, is there anyone there who could define a hate crime? Because it's not what some people think it is. Some people think if the person is yelling out an opinion counter to their own on masks or vaccinations, that constitutes a hate crime, but it doesn't. It would be probably beneficial if people knew what it really was. So if you have the definition, that would be good.
Thank you, Councillor. In regards to hate, it must be directed towards a member of a group identified under the Ontario Human Rights. So there's 14 prohibited grounds. Vaccination status, as far as I know, is not one of them. Neither is your status of employment. So I hate cops, I hate councillors, I hate doctors, doesn't constitute. It can be an act, or it can be an incitement to act in a way that's criminal towards one of those prohibited grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code. So I think that's probably the easiest sort of layman's term that I can provide at this time. We will put out through our social media the exact definition and more clear examples so that we can help the public to understand what is and what isn't. I would again encourage, as you have, we need to know what crimes are taking place, what hate crimes are taking place. And so we do want people to call in. At the other end of the spectrum, we are getting flooded by a lot of nuisance calls. We're getting people calling our 911 communication center, asking us if we can find out where Justin Trudeau is. We're getting people calling in and asking whether or not we believe in vaccination status. So our lines are getting clogged up with a lot of nuisance calls, and our call takers are trying to receive the information that has the highest risk and requires the greatest level of service for us to deploy to that risk. So thank you very much for your question. I hope that goes some way to addressing it, and we'll follow up with more information for the general public around definitions and appropriate use of 911 and 311 services.
Okay, if you could make it clear who those groups are. It's basically race, orientation, and those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, if we can keep to one question and a quick one, I want to get to every member of council, so please be considerate. Let's go to Keith now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll try and keep it brief as we only have the one question. I guess this is for Chief Sloly. What I'm hearing from my residents is the frustration with the situation that we have now with how to get the trucks and the truckers out of the core. And the question that a number of my residents have raised is, why didn't we, knowing they were coming, knowing they were heading for downtown, knowing they were heading for Parliament Hill and the core, why didn't we take steps in advance to divert them, for example, so that they were diverted to a central parking spot, whether or area like Tunney's pasture or something, and then shuttle to the hill, walk to the hill, take the bus to the hill. The problem seems to be fixing the situation of getting them out of the core. What if we had taken steps, or why didn't we take steps, I guess is the question, to keep them out of the core in the first place and still allow them to protest as they're lawfully allowed to protest?
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think I addressed this earlier on, but I'll go back to it again. I'm not aware of a lawful authority that allows me to block.
I'm not saying, Chief, that you should have shut access to the city. What I'm saying is when they were in the city, to divert them to a central location and encourage them to access the hill in a different way that didn't leave the trucks in the core.
Thank you very much.
It's a different question.
Thank you very much. I was about to answer that question, but if you would allow me to answer it, I will.
Please do.
Okay, thank you. And that's exactly what we did. Through negotiation, well in advance of their arrival to the city, we recognized that the crush of trucks coming in from all the different directions, literally north, south, east, and west, that we would have to be able to find large locations where we could get them to park and move without their trucks into the city. All of that was done. It is all well documented. It was done through the cooperation and the participation of city staff, and many trucks are in those parking lots. Unfortunately, many more trucks came and we weren't able to provide that as an option. We are not allowed to block the city off. Even now, the red zone or the footprint we've established still has an emergency services route that we are able to get fire, ambulance, and police services through. We do not have a full lockdown in any place. That would be dangerous. So again, I know people are looking for a simple, elegant solution to a very complex problem, but that is not a solution that was available to us. We have continually restricted access points as much as we can without blocking commerce, emergency service providers, healthcare providers, city workers from coming and going into the city, and that will continue to be our plan going forward as we try to restrict access for the main demonstrators and the larger vehicles coming into the area. But what you're asking for, sir, was all assessed, all part of the planning. There was significant success with it, but we still have significant problems as a result.
Chair Deans, you're next on the list. I'm not sure if you wanted a question. If not, we'll go to Councillor Tierney.
I will pass. Thank you.
Okay. So it'll be Councillor Tierney and then Councillor King.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chief. Look, I'm looking at the reluctance of calling this an occupation. And I'm just curious why we haven't actually said that this is an occupation. I see them with wood burning pizza ovens, playing road hockey. It doesn't look like they're going anywhere. It looks like a tailgate party. And I'm just wondering, is there a reason why we're not calling this for what it is? It's an occupation. Is there ramifications to changing the verbiage? Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I believe we actually have been talking about this as a transition, and we use the actual term transition from demonstration to occupation. I actually don't think that's even fully accurate. There's a demonstration that's continuous, and there are elements of occupation that are taking place. Increasingly, as we transitioned out of the core demonstration of Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, negotiations were clear that the core of the trucker demonstrations were going to be staying. They were going to be staying until they had spoken to the Prime Minister. They were going to be staying for varying other degrees around vaccination rules, federal and provincial, and they were going to be staying in some cases from a large number of other elements beyond the original trucker demonstrations, all the way through to an end of the government and overthrow of the government. And I think we've all seen things on social media. So there is definitely a demonstration phase that peaks and valleys, and in between there are increasing elements of occupation that are coming in. Are we into a pure occupation? No, we're not. It is a transitory period. That's the best I can describe it as. Each of those definitions come with risks and come with resource demands and come with, unfortunately, implications for businesses and residents in the city as a whole. I mentioned again, I'll mention it one more time. I am less and less convinced of an elegant, effective police solution to this. There are going to have to be other solution options that are significantly visited. And we've had a number of discussions, some of which you were involved with, around what are the roles of the various levels of government, elected officials, other statutes that go well beyond my ability to engage in and well beyond my resources and my mandate to engage in.
Great, thank you. I'll let my other members of council ask questions, and thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. So it'll be Councillor King, and then we're going to Councillor Leeper. And just a reminder, we do have another 9 councillors to ask questions. Please make them short. We want to get to everyone, and we do have a media availability after. So Councillor King, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You have indicated that you're exploring different options because, as you had just said, speaking to Councillor Tierney and others, that there might not be a policing solution. And we've heard that you've said that you've been talking about injunctions and military support to police services, I suppose, for a plan of action to end this demonstration. And you've also noted that elements of this demonstration is transforming into an occupation. I'm wondering if you can give us a timeline when we can expect a plan of action and when that will be communicated to the board, the council, and residents, to general public.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Literally every day we do a threat risk assessment. We get updates on the various plans and options that we're looking at, and we assess to what extent they can be implemented. I could probably tell you that if I get the right option with the right risk assessment, we'll have a plan today. But if the situation changes, as it does literally on a day-by-day basis, that plan may no longer be valid. As soon as I have a definitive plan, I will share with who I can, what I can, at the most timely opportunity. I may not be able to do that depending on the nature of the plan. So I can't give you a definitive, it's 1 day, it's 2 days, it's 1 week, it's 2 weeks. I'm not in a position to do that.
Councillor Leeper, followed by Councillor Brockington.
Thank you very much. Chief, I guess I'm discouraged to hear some of the comments around non-policing solutions, but more practically at the moment, with respect to the hotels, has work been done to try to encourage hotels not to accommodate the protesters who we can expect this weekend? I'm very concerned about what this weekend will look like.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We've been in constant liaison with the Hotel Association. There's a gentleman's name, I think it's Ball, Mr. Ball, who's been in direct contact with Superintendent Jamie Dunlop and have literally had hundreds of conversations around this. They've been very helpful in terms of helping us to understand what short-term and longer-term bookings look like. We were alerted to the fact that they were seeing an increase in hotel bookings for the weekend coming up, and we had that information from even during the past weekend. So it was clear that we were going to go in cycles of peaks and valleys. They are a privately owned set of businesses. They have their own requirements for profit making, and they have their own legislative restrictions around who they can deny access to and under what circumstances. And I will not speak for the hotel owners of the association, but they have been very much involved in our planning, risk assessments, engagement around this entire issue. Hopefully that answers your question, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Brockington, followed by Councillor Cloutier.
Chief, is the Ottawa Police Service responsible for negotiating the end of a federal political protest? Or are there others that you look to and expect will be engaged to negotiate an end of this occupation? If people have driven across Canada to come because they want to speak to the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition and they're not meeting with them, then what is the end game? If people have a political protest, political issues, that's not the Ottawa Police to solve. So who is responsible for negotiating an end of this political protest and occupation?
Councillor Brockington, I can say, sir, we've had some really engaging conversations and you've raised some very important questions, probably none more so than the one you just raised. I will continue to look for the safest, most effective policing solution possible with my partners at municipal, provincial, and federal levels. We continue to receive significant support from my policing partners, emergency services partners, and let me again include our city partners, and my thanks to Steve Kanalakis. But this is a global pandemic that has resulted in a range of municipal, provincial, and federal rules and regulations and laws. And people across this country have decided to come to the nation's capital, the City of Ottawa, to express a wide range of frustrations, some specific to the pandemic, some specific to vaccination-related regulations and laws and restrictions, and some just to express frustration around government in general. Nowhere in my job description and nothing that I can find in the Police Services Act requires me by law to negotiate the end of any demonstration, no matter how large or small, no matter what the reason is. The only thing I'm required to do is provide adequate and effective police services to the residents of the jurisdiction that I'm sworn to serve and protect. And that is what I have been doing from the day I took office and will be to my last day in office. I stated before, I'll state it again. I am increasingly concerned that there is no policing solution to this and that other solutions are going to have to be considered well beyond my ability to dictate or even influence. But thank you for your question, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Cloutier, followed by Councillor Kitts.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour la mise à jour. Thank you, Chief. What organizations are you working with respect to tracking the hate groups and nationalist, white nationalist organization, or removing and charging those bad actors?
Thank you, Councillor Cloutier. We are working with literally every municipal, provincial police service in Canada, the RCMP. We have full cooperation and support from CSIS and our national security agencies. International security agencies through our national security are also contributing. And as I said, this is a local, provincial, national, now international demonstration. And what happens in other parts of the country and indeed in other parts of the world have direct effect here. So there is a massive amount of intelligence and information sharing taking place and has been so from the very beginning of the demonstration, even when it started on the West Coast, right up until literally the question you just asked. We are sharing information in real time. Hopefully that answers your question, sir.
We'll hear from Councillor Kitts, and it would be Councillor DeRuse. I do not think he's logged in, so then we'll be going to Councillor Moffat after.
Thank you. We saw in a release from Ottawa Police yesterday that it was estimated that there were approximately 250 individuals involved with the downtown occupation currently. Are you telling us that there is no way with your current resources and the ones available to you that we cannot end this before we see a resurgence on the weekend and enable a situation where pro-protest and anti-protest civilians are gathering?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Kitts. I can tell you that we are aware that within the demonstration, core and fringe, there is a significant capability using old school CB radios to new school social media platforms. They're operating command centers locally, nationally, and internationally to coordinate activities. There is international fundraising going on. The level of organization, funding, and capability around this demonstration is probably one of, if not the most important factor that makes it unique, unprecedented, and singularly risky in every aspect. We have already seen in the last 24 hours that a much smaller demonstration in a much easier to manage jurisdiction within this country, despite the best efforts of intelligence gathering, investigation, resource, multi-joint forces operations, within minutes failed to move a much smaller and simpler protest into any better safety feature. This is not as simple as any other demonstration that we'd like to believe. You've asked an important question. It just ain't that simple.
Thank you.
Councillor Moffat, followed by Councillor Meehan.
Thank you. By virtue of being number 21, I have no questions that you haven't already answered multiple times. Thank you.
We will move on to Councillor Meehan, followed by Councillor Hubley.
Councillor Hubley has had to go to an appointment, so he's unavailable.
It'll be Councillor Meehan, and then we have Police Service Board member Neerman, Sweda, and Johnson, as well as Smallwood.
I'd just like to offer my thanks to everybody. Chief, you're asking residents in the downtown core to report incidents to the police or incidents of criminal activity. Yet we are hearing reports that police officers are witnessing criminal acts, but have been told, and I'm asking this on behalf of residents who are talking about this, and that the officers have been told to stand by and not police those incidents, even though they want to, for fear of escalating the situation. Can you address that? Are those rumors, or is that in fact a fact?
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Mann. I think from the briefings that we provided the board last week and this week, that we were very emphatic. We would expect to see criminal acts taking place online and on our streets. We would investigate every single one of them, and we would take it as far as we possibly could to lay charges, make arrests if necessary, and pursue prosecutions. We've been working with the Crown Attorney from Eastern Ontario to prepare for just that, and we put resources in place. We also told the board last week and this week, and the council and our media briefings, that there will be many instances where we cannot intervene in the moment, but that does not mean we will not hold people to account at any point in the days and the weeks and the months and the years following. Officers may in fact have witnessed criminal offenses taking place in front of them. If they did not involve an immediate loss of life or risk to life, they probably would not have intervened, but would follow up by way of investigations. We're collecting information by way of CCTV camera, videotaping, observations, and witnesses. We encourage people to report any criminal acts that we were not present for or don't have sufficient evidence for. But we are going to have to make an assessment in every case whether or not making arrest at that moment will create a bigger public safety risk than the crime that's being committed. I hope that answers your question. It's one that's been raised before, and that is the situation still to this day.
Okay, on social media, we're seeing trucks full of diesel fuel, canisters of diesel fuel. Is this in fact, what can you give us the risk of danger of having these trucks ready to fuel up other trucks in the downtown core?
I'm in the hands of the facilitator. I think that's an entirely different question. Do you want me to continue to answer questions posed to me?
No, I guess I'll just leave it then at one question.
We'll stick,
Yes, we can
stick to one.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. That's it for me then.
Thank you. We still have it's our 4 Police Service Board members. So we have member Neerman, then it'll be member Sweda, member Johnson, and then member Smallwood. So if we could give them all access to be able to ask their questions, and we'll be able to move on. Member,
and if we could ask for quick questions and quick responses, because we have the media availability. They're waiting for the chief and I and Steve. Thank you.
All right. Member Neerman.
Thank you, everyone. I have already indicated most of the questions have already been asked, and we were separately briefed, so I have no question. I will pass. Thanks for your teamwork and the good work all of you are doing. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chief. And thanks, Chair, everyone.
Member Sueda, followed by Member Johnson.
Thank you. Likewise, all my questions have been answered, and I've also had debriefs with the chief. So thank you very much, and thank you, Chief, and thank you to all the OPS.
Member Johnson, followed by Member Smallwood.
Thank you, Chief, and all of the OPS for all of your very hard work. There is a disproportionate impact of the truck demonstration on individuals living in the area of the demonstration, in particular, members of the BIPOC and LGBTQ2 community. Can you please review the services of the Human Needs Task Force and how to access their services? And thank you again.
I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood the question, Member Johnson. Am I to review the services of the Human Needs Task Force?
Yes, this was a services briefly presented earlier in the meeting, and I guess I'm just highlighting again and asking you about it. But I'd also be happy if this information was just released, in a statement or on social media as well, that there is a task force at 211 and 311 that is going to provide these services.
Okay, that's probably something for the city manager to do.
Yeah, Steve Kanalakis, we have a Donna Gray, a general manager, Bev, that would be happy to brief the board on at your next meeting or your next briefing. So the chief can arrange that with Steve Kanalakis, and she's very good. She's got a very good detailed list of services provided for the most vulnerable. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And our last question will be Member Smallwood. I believe you're on mute. There we go.
My questions have already been answered. Thank you.
Listen, thank you all very much. We will have another technical briefing before council before next Wednesday to keep you up to date. And I know there's a council liaison that everyone should have access to that the chief has created to help answer questions of concern. So we'll now adjourn for a few moments, and then for those members of the media, we'll start the media conference in a few moments. On va commencer la réunion de presse dans quelques minutes. Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for joining us for the media availability portion of the Briefing Council. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui pour la disponibilité des médias. My name is Constable Amy Gagnon, and I will be your moderator. Je suis l'agente Amy Gagnon, et je serai l'animatrice de cette séance. Before we begin, a reminder to media to put your microphone on mute until I invite you to ask your question. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais vous rappeler de désactiver votre microphone jusqu'à ce que je vous invite à poser votre question. Also, a reminder to all subject matter experts to keep their cameras off unless they are speaking. Un rappel à tous nos conférenciers d'experts de fermer l'option vidéo lorsqu'ils ne répondent pas à une question. With us this afternoon, we have Mayor Jim Watson, le maire Jim Watson, Chief Peter Sloly, le chef de police Peter Sloly, Deputy Chief Steve Bell, le chef adjoint Steve Bell, Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson, la chef adjointe Patricia Ferguson. We also have City Manager Steve Kanalakis, Directeur municipal Steve Kanalakis. We have General Manager for the Emergency and Protective Services, Kim Ayotte. Et nous avons aussi le Directeur général des services de protection et d'urgence, Kim Ayotte. I will now be inviting questions from each agency. It'll be alphabetically. You may ask one question each. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions de chaque média par ordre alphabétique, vous allez pouvoir poser une question chaque. We will begin with Laura Osman. We have Laura Osman, and it'll be followed by Joanne Chianello.
Thank you so much for taking our questions. I just wanted to start by asking if you had any more details about sort of the context around the arrests, particularly the weapons charge, if you can give us any more information about that.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'll turn things over briefly to Deputy Chief Bell for the specifics of the weapons piece. I can again remind listeners and media, thus far, 3 people have been charged with criminal offenses. There are 18 active investigations, including those into the desecration of the war monument, our cenotaph. And this includes the incidents that took place in regards to the Shepherds of Good Hope. We will be releasing today a photo of the individual involved in the crime at the cenotaph, and we will be continuing our appeal to the public to support in identifying this person so that we can arrest them and charge them and prosecute them. We'll appeal to the public to continue to send in any reports of hate crimes or any other crimes in association to this demonstration. We continue to receive calls to our hotline in regards to criminal complaints that are being investigated, hate crime instances that are being investigated by our hate crimes unit. In regards to that specific weapons case, I will turn that over to Deputy Chief Steve Bell.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for your question, Laura. So specifically around that case, we received information through our open source social media scans that somebody was looking to attend the protest with a weapon. We were able to intervene and intercede that person, and as a result of that stop and the subsequent investigation, a weapon was seized and the male was subsequently charged.
Are you able to say what the weapon was?
Yeah, the weapon was a long gun. And as I indicated, it has been seized and now entered into evidence for the case.
Thank you, Laura. Our next question goes to CBC, Joanne Chianello. It'll be followed by City News, Alex Gouge. Go ahead, Joanne.
Hi, can you hear me there? All right.
Sure,
sure. I have a question for both the Chief and the Mayor. Chief, you have said that you increasingly don't believe that there is a policing end to this demonstration, occupation, whatever we're calling it now. Can you be clear about what you mean? That is alarming to people, and I'd like to hear what we're talking about when we say that.
Thank you. Again, we continue to look at every potential option available to us within the legal bounds, from negotiation through to court injunction, through to an enforced removal, all of the options that are available to us. Increasingly, as we see demonstrations, not just here, but elsewhere in the country, where there are efforts by strictly a policing action, we are not as confident as we have been that police alone will resolve this situation substantially, never mind in totality. And it's in that context that I make the statement, there is likely no policing solution to this, but in combination with other efforts, there may be other opportunities to substantially reduce, if not end this demonstration. It is a local demonstration, a provincial demonstration, a national demonstration, and one that has international elements associated to it.
I know, but I don't know what that means, right? When you say other than police, do you need politics? Do you need military? I don't understand the answer. I understand it's not only police, but then what are those other options that are not police options that we might need?
I think you just listed most of them right there.
Mayor, can I have you comment on that?
Yeah, if I can offer a comment, Joanne, this whole protest, march, and occupation can end tomorrow if the leaders of the group show some empathy, as they say they are, people's nerves are frayed. They haven't been able to sleep for 5 nights in a row. People are being harassed on the street. They're being attacked in coffee shops. We see someone wanting to bring a gun down to the Parliament buildings. The organizers of this march are not hurting the government, they're hurting the people of Ottawa. And I think it's time that they show some leadership, show some backbone, and get out in front of this and say, folks, we've made our point. We're doing more harm than good by parking and honking all hours in residential neighborhoods. It's time to move on. That's one of the solutions, is they have the leadership of the movement that claim they want to be empathetic today in a press release. Well, if they're concerned about our city and they give a damn about our city, they'd move on and stop harassing our people. This has gone on far too long. Thank you.
But we know that's not going to happen, right? Like that, or let's just say it seems unlikely that's not going to happen. So the people of Ottawa are thinking, well, what might happen, right? And I think this is one of the things they're looking at. For example, we hear for maybe the first time that there's U.S. funding involved. That could be my follow-up, maybe. I'd like to hear about that.
Sorry, Joanne, there's actually no time for follow-up. We're just doing one question.
Sorry,
each.
all right, thanks.
So, thanks, Joanne. And we now move on to Alex Gouge from City News. Alex will be followed by Ted Raymond from CTV Ottawa. Alex, you may go ahead.
Hello, my question is for Steve Kanalakis today. With some snowfall on the horizon, about like 10 to 15 or 20 centimeters expected, what is the city doing to plan for snow removal in the downtown core given the ongoing demonstration?
Hi, Alex. The city has been working with the police and the National Capital Region Control Center to ensure that the downtown streets get plowed. Obviously, the area that's occupied, or I should say, I don't want to use the word occupy, where trucks are parked on the streets, we won't be able to get into there. We'll have to see if we can get into some of the sidewalks. That's what we're most concerned about in some of those areas. We'll be able to scrape down the roads after, should those trucks move. But in the interim, we're going to be plowing around those areas that are barricaded off, and we'll be able to get to them after. So there should be no disruption to snow clearing in the downtown core, other than the parts where trucks are parked and we can't get our heavy equipment or our sidewalk equipment in to scrape down those sidewalks. So there'll have to be a cleanup after the fact once those trucks move.
Thank you, Alex. We'll now go to Ted Raymond with CTV Ottawa, followed by Craig Lord with Global News. So, Ted Raymond, I believe you're here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so my question is to Chief Sloly. Why did police allow these heavy trucks to just park anywhere they wanted on major roads throughout the downtown, starting on Friday and into Saturday? Was there any anticipation? Did you not anticipate how difficult it would be to get them to move out? And do you think that was a mistake to just allow them to park anywhere and not enforce any of the parking rules that exist in this city?
Yep, thank you very much, Ted. As I explained, maybe you weren't present for the briefing to council. That in fact did not happen. Through extensive efforts of communication, coordination in advance of the trucks arriving in the city, every effort was made to find locations outside of the core where those trucks could be parked and people could move into the downtown core without the volume of trucks. Every effort was made. And in fact, a lot of compliance was achieved through those negotiation and coordination efforts. Thousands and thousands of other trucks arrived well beyond that. And I think, again, it's been explained several times, but I'll say it again. Our ability to negotiate is only with a limited portion of those who've come to Ottawa to demonstrate. Even where we had significant cooperation, there were significant other elements where there was no communication, no desire to coordinate, and certainly no desire to negotiate. In fact, in many cases, quite the opposite. Very volatile, confrontational, non-compliant behavior by wide numbers of individuals, groups, and other organizations that were not part of the core truck transportation group that came through here. That continues to be our number one problem. Despite days and days and days of communication and coordination, we were only able to get significant success with those willing to come to the table to communicate and negotiate. And we have had significant success as a result of it. But this demonstration is not monolithic. It doesn't represent any one cause. And in fact, that is the very nature of its unprecedented, risky context that we are challenged with here today. We did get a lot of trucks to not come into the downtown core. A lot more came, and a lot of them had no intention to follow any direction. I will ask Deputy Chief Ferguson to speak to the traffic plan that we're putting in place for this weekend.
Thank you, Chief, and thanks for the question, Ted. So we have hardened the footprint that we have right now, and that you may have heard we'll be putting up barriers, concrete barriers and other jersey barriers to prevent any more vehicles from getting in that area. We are limited in the amount of barriers that we are able to put up. We cannot obviously just put up barriers around all of Ottawa and prevent people from rolling in. So the chief mentioned we are doing a lot of negotiations with our police liaison team, and our traffic officers are now focusing their enforcement on Highway Traffic Act violations. And we've seen a number of them taking place in terms of people driving the wrong way down certain streets, that type of behavior, and reckless driving and without due care and attention for the motoring public. So we will be enforcing those rules in earnest moving forward.
Just to reinforce that, Ted, again, thank you for your question. We are engaging in enforcement from bylaw infraction, parking infraction with the support of city bylaw. Kim Ayotte has provided information in an earlier briefing to council around a large number of tickets issued within the immediate vicinity of the footprint of the demonstration. Increasingly, as we've been able to free up our officers and our bylaw partners, we've been able to move that enforcement out beyond the immediate zone into our communities that have been most impacted. That will continue to escalate the level of enforcement for bylaw, provincial statutes, as well as criminal code statutes, which I briefed on our earlier question. Increasing, escalating enforcement has been part of our plan, will continue to be part of our plan. People are being arrested, people are being charged, people will be held to account. Today, a week from today, a month from today, years from today, people will be held to account.
Thank you, Ted. Next, we have Craig Lord from Global News. Following Craig, we will have Christy Kirkup from Globe and Mail. So Craig Lord, go ahead, Craig.
Hi there, good afternoon. Thank you for taking our questions. Chief Sloly, I know that you don't have firm numbers on what we should expect this weekend, but can you give Ottawa residents any sense of what they should expect in general? Will it be a repeat of this past weekend? Will it be diminished, or what will be different this weekend, or the same as more truckers or convoy supporters are expected to come to Ottawa again?
Thank you very much, Craig, for the question. I'll turn things over to Deputy Chief Bell, who's overseeing our intelligence operation.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. So in terms of the what we're anticipating this week, as I indicated in the press conference, we've been following intelligence since the inception of the convoy about 2.5 weeks ago. We continue to work with our partners between the RCMP, the OPP, the City de Quebec, et Gatineau Police, to look at gathering as much relevant information as we can in a timely basis to set up and develop our operational plans. As we're doing that, we're gathering information that we expect to see unfold over the weekend. So far, what we're receiving and what we're anticipating to happen is the convoy and the footprint that is currently within the streets of Ottawa will maintain relatively stable, but we will see an increase in vehicular traffic come into the city. We're following through our intelligence sources many different groups that are indicating that they plan to come to the city to support the protest, similar to what they did last weekend. Beyond those that will come into the city in vehicle, we know last weekend that there was a considerable amount of foot traffic that converged in the market area that we were we needed to respond to. We anticipate to see those same levels again this weekend, but we expect to see the addition of counter protests as the weekend unfolds. There's been a considerable number of people who have obviously voiced displeasure about what's occurring and have identified that they would attend the downtown core and provide counter protests to the convoy and the truckers in our city.
Thank you, Craig. We will now go to Christy Kirkup from the Globe and Mail, who will be followed by Mylène Crête de la Presse. So go ahead, Christy.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm wondering if we could just go back to the question that Joanne had about the significant element that you talked about in terms of the United States, the funding, organization, and demonstrating that is coming from south of the border. What do you know about this and what's driving this?
Thank you very much, Christy. I don't think I'll be able to provide much more than what I did before. Through the various levels of intelligence gathering we've been able to get. We've seen funding sources from within Canada. There were some theories that funding was coming from different parts of the world. As of today, the only verification that I've been able to receive are funding sources from the United States.
Thank you, Christy. We will now go to Mylène Crête de la Presse, qui sera suivie de Julien Paquette, Le Droit. Mylène,
oui,
tu peux poser ta question.
J'aimerais savoir, est-ce que vous pouvez nous en dire plus sur la personne qui est recherchée? Maybe I'll ask this in English. In English, can you tell us more about the person that you are looking for in regards to the War Memorial incident? I noticed that the person has a SQ hat on their head.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Steve Bell to respond to that question.
Thank you for your question, Melanie. So what you've seen is initially we received through social media many complaints about an individual who was engaging in inappropriate activities on the War Memorial, particularly the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. We initiated a investigation as well as dialogue with our Crown Attorney's Office. And as a result of that, we've received more social media images as well as other information about the activity of that person during that period of time. Earlier this afternoon, we put out a press release with a picture of the person that we're seeking to identify to look to have people contact with the identity or to have the person engaged in that activity turn themselves into police. That's an ongoing investigation, and we will continue to update on the progress of it.
And Mylène, just so you know, that press release with the picture will be going out this afternoon. Alors, pour tous ceux il y a une photo et un communiqué de presse qui sortira cet après-midi avec la photo et plus d'informations. Merci, Mylène. Maintenant, Julien Paquette avec Le Droit. Julien Paquette, Le Droit, followed by Bruce Teachman with the Ottawa Citizen.
Bonjour, content que vous ayez accepté de prendre nos questions aujourd'hui. Bon, les résidents de centre-ville ont plusieurs complaintes à faire. On a entendu vendredi dernier et plus tôt cette semaine que la manifestation ne devrait pas avoir d'impact sur des activités de la ville comme la collecte de déchets, par exemple. Mais j'entends de résidents depuis hier qu'il y a certains édifices à logement où c'était un problème. Donc, je serais curieux d'en savoir davantage. Est-ce qu'il y a effectivement, capable de nous donner l'information sur effectivement s'il y a des bâtiments où on n'a pas eu accès à cause de la manifestation ou s'il y a des retards de quelconque par rapport à ces services-là?
Kim, est-ce que vous êtes ici pour répondre?
Oui, merci, Julien. À ce moment, nous autres, pour les déchets, on ramasse les déchets et il n'y a pas de problème. Les édifices qui ont des problèmes, peut-être, c'est parce que c'est pas la ville qui ramasse leurs déchets, c'est eux autres qui sont responsables pour leurs déchets eux autres mêmes. Puis peut-être que les camions ou les gens qui viennent chercher les déchets pour ces édifices-là sont pas, ils ont décidé de pas venir parce que ça se passe. Vraiment, c'est un autre problème qu'on n'a pas entendu. C'est la première fois que j'entends ça. Si tu as de l'information, tu pourrais me l'envoyer, puis on pourrait regarder qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour leur aider aussi.
Merci, Julien. Thank you, Julien. Next, we go to Bruce Deachman from the Ottawa Citizen, and then followed by John Willing with the Ottawa Sun. So Bruce,
I guess my question, oh, can you hear me?
Sure can, go ahead.
I guess my question is for Chief Sloly, and I appreciate your concerns about not igniting this powder keg, but I'm wondering if, I don't know if you saw on social media, there was a picture of 3 women standing in a road that had stopped a transport truck. And I'm wondering if you are concerned that the perception of inaction is going to cause residents to take matters into their own hands, and especially with Steve Bell mentioning counter-protesters coming this weekend. What are your concerns about that?
Thank you very much for your question. I share those concerns. That's why we've gone as far as we have, and we'll continue to push ourselves to provide the most fulsome information, particularly in briefings to our board, our mayor, our council, and the media. This is almost hour number 4 or 4.5, I'm not sure, today alone for me in terms of briefings to BIAs, board members, the mayor, council members, and now to media. As in addition to our social media efforts, we're trying to help people to understand the full context of what we're doing. All options are on the table. Enforcement is escalating. We're moving resources when we can away from the downtown core into the affected neighborhoods to take enforcement actions and to provide a greater sense of safety and service to the citizens. That's being done in coordination with city workers and our partners in policing. But we simply have a significant risk scenario that we can't solve all the problems for in a way that we'd like to. I would really encourage members, we know there is underreporting by community members who have been directly affected by hate incidents and hate crimes. We know there's significant underreporting of people who claim to have been the victims of criminal behavior, threatening behavior, criminal harassment, mischief, minor assaults. We're seeing it on Twitter, we're hearing it from council reports, and we're hearing it from media reports. But if our investigators don't have an actual report of a complaint, they cannot commence a criminal investigation. Where we do have complaints, and so far to date, I remind, we have 18 active investigations into those who reported criminal complaints to us. Within those 18 investigations, we've been able to arrest and charge 3 people for those criminal offenses. We are actively seeking the person wanted in connection to the cenotaph crime. Where we get reports, we are able to assign investigators, and so far we've been able to actually arrest and charge people for those criminal offenses. But we can't arrest, we can't charge people for what we don't have complaints for. Please encourage through your media reporting people to utilize our regular call centers and our hotlines to report criminal activity, hate activity. They will all be investigated, and wherever possible, we will pursue people across the city, across this province, across this country, and internationally to charge them for those offenses.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a hard stop at 5. We're hoping to get through 2 more questions. Unfortunately, I believe Deputy Bell will have to leave us shortly. So we're going to go with John Willing with the Ottawa Sun and Marie-Christine Villeneuve with TVA Gatineau. So, John.
It's great. Thanks for taking our questions. Why are protesters allowed to set up what looks like a supplies and logistics camp in the parking lot of the Ottawa Baseball Stadium?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to turn that over to Deputy Chief Ferguson for a response.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, John. We, as part of the sort of negotiations and our police liaison team, along with the city, we were able to establish some places that were out of the city's core and footprint to provide people with the opportunity to some basic human needs. And so this was part of a negotiation that we were able to release. Otherwise, those people would be downtown in our streets, potentially causing some of the issues that we're seeing now. That was the reason for it.
Thank you, John. Et maintenant, Marie-Christine Villeneuve, TVA, Ottawa-Gatineau. And we'll take from Marie-Christine Villeneuve from TVA, Gatineau.
Can we also have Alex from the Star? I turned down the interview saying come to the press conference, so I don't want to mislead him. So we can have him after TVA.
Yep, we'll try and make the questions quick and the answers quick so we can fit them in then. So we have Marie-Christine, unmute, please. So we can hear you. On t'entend pas, Marie-Christine. Okay. We'll go to Alex Baligal from the Toronto Star in the meantime. So, Alex.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead, Alex.
Thanks, Mayor Watson, for getting me in here. I just want to understand, I think this is a question for Chief Sloly, actually. I just want to kind of understand where this is going. So it sounds like we're expecting maybe thousands of more people to come back to have a similar demonstration that we saw last weekend, again this weekend. You're saying that the police alone increasingly looks like you can't solve it alone. The organizers themselves are saying they're not going anywhere. We're expecting this huge re-influx of people. What is this looking more and more like you're going to need to call in support from the military in order to end this? What is the trajectory of this situation in your view?
Thank you very much for the question, Alex. I know it's an answer that didn't seem to have traction before, but I'll go back to it again. My responsibility as a chief of police here is to serve and protect the city, and to do so in the most effective and adequate way possible. While I have a certain amount of ability to negotiate and use a range of options all the way through to the use of force and the application of enforcement through bylaw, provincial statute, and federal statute, including criminal charges, all of which we have done and will continue to do. We are charging people under the bylaw. We are charging people under the Provincial Offences Act. We are charging people criminally. We have a range of active criminal investigations, and we will charge the people who are responsible for the offenses, no matter how long it takes and where they live and where they register their vehicles. But I do not have a mandate under the Police Services Act to negotiate with the tens of thousands of people who come to Ottawa to exercise their charter of right to free speech, freedom of movement. I need to try to do so with them, try to work with them to do so in the most safe way possible and to encourage the most lawful activities possible. But I don't have a singular mandate in the city, this province, or this country to negotiate the end to any demonstration. There always needs to be an element outside of the police for any truly successful end to any demonstration, particularly one of this size and nature. So all options are on the table. All of them are being explored, from enforcement to injunctions, from negotiation to the invocation of other civil actors and other elected officials at other levels of government to try to find a swift, sustainable, and safe end to this demonstration. This is a demonstration happening in Ottawa. It's happening in other parts of the country, and it's happening in other parts of the world. This is not a simple local demonstration.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one last question. We're going to go to Paul Vieira with the Wall Street Journal. Paul?
Yes. Does Chief Sloly, Mayor Watson, I mean, the message is that this may not be resolved with a policing solution. Are you asked? Do you believe that the Prime Minister has to get involved in this in order to bring an end to the demonstration, protest, occupation?
Is that to the chief?
Whoever wants to answer.
Chief?
That's a question for politicians to decide. It's a question for the Prime Minister's office if you choose to send that to him. I have a responsibility under the Police Act to look after the safety of the city, and that's exactly what I've been doing. We'll continue to do so, but there needs to be other elements brought into finding a safe, swift, and sustainable end to this demonstration that's happening here and across the country.
If I can add, we obviously are going to require the resources and the goodwill of all three orders of government because this is bigger than the City of Ottawa. We happen to be targeted because we're the home to the nation's capital. But obviously, we're going to have to continue to count on the support of our federal government and the provincial government for a number of things, including funding and resources to ensure that we bring this protest to a peaceful conclusion sooner than later. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we apologize to the media we have not been able to get to. Alors, on s'excuse aux médias auxquels on n'a pas pu avoir le temps de poser vos questions. This concludes the time we have. And so, cela conclut le point de presse pour aujourd'hui. Thank you very much for having joined us. Merci de vous être rejoints à nous.